Welcome back to Dead Reckoning, the Human Life Expectancy channel. Having made the case in the last few videos that the number of lives saved by new technologies is a large multiple of the additional lives risked, the next few videos will focus on the ethics of applying new technologies and medical advances. In this video, we'll forward several common perspectives that will be helpful in examining the ethics of applying new technologies. In future videos, we'll then apply these perspectives to genetic engineering and other new technologies. So let's start at the beginning. Ethics was invented by humans to establish moral principles that govern our behavior. Evolutionary psychologist Jeffrey Miller provides evidence that ethics evolved not out of nepotism or kindness to blood relatives, or from reciprocity, the belief that good deeds would be repaid, but actually from sexual selection, because, as he says, quote, "Our ancestors favored sexual partners who were kind, generous, helpful, and fair." While most still select for ethical behaviors in their mates, today the ethical principles are used to resolve conflicts and establish rights when one party's actions adversely impact others. Underlying ethics is the assumption of continuance, for if nothing continues, whether it's individuals, societies, species, or even the planet, it's hard to argue that anything matters much. As biological anthropologist James Chisholm wrote, quote, "All values arise from the goal of indefinite continuance." And Immanuel Kant also wrote, "Neither happiness nor ethics is possible without an unending hereafter." A second underlying assumption is the ability to make choices that impact others. If there's no ability to choose, there's no ethical issues to address. In this way, new capabilities and technologies continually drive new ethical choices. So, at one end of the spectrum, if your life is short and involves no decisions that impact others, survival's all that matters and ethical issues are basically irrelevant. For example, a male ant who lives only for a few weeks and has no latitude for making decisions needn't be racked with ethical issues. At the other end of the spectrum, consider Homo sapiens. We live a long time, and as we've argued, we're likely to live longer soon. And even more importantly, our ability to choose and make decisions that impact ourselves and other species is rapidly expanding. New technologies are greatly expanding our ability to choose who we and other species will become and the future of life on Earth. These decisions necessarily involve trade-offs between individuals, groups, generations, and species, all of which raise fundamental ethical issues. We must also acknowledge that what's considered ethical or unethical varies across cultures and time, such as eating meat, blasphemy, premarital sex, homosexuality, polygamy, and divorce. So, if we're searching for timeless, invariant rules for ethical behaviors, we're on shaky ground to begin with. Still, in exploring ethical issues, the golden rule of treating others the way you would like to be treated is a good place to start. It follows directly from the ethic of reciprocity and is found in most religions and cultures. However, it represents two challenges. First, what if treating others the way we'd like to be treated involves unbearably high costs for ourselves? In an extreme example, if giving your last morsel of food to another would cause you to starve, you could hardly be expected to give it to someone else. So the golden rule requires that our needs are met well enough to be able to tend to the needs of others. While this is not always so, Homo sapiens' extraordinary historical population growth and increase in life expectancy clearly show that our societies have been increasingly successful at meeting individuals' needs. While society must continually strive to do better, this positive trajectory should allow us to focus more and more on the needs of others, freeing us to behave more ethically over time. The second challenge is, whom do we include in our definition of others? Historically, we've violated the golden rule by excluding groups of people from our definition of others. Historically, slaves were denied basic human rights in many cultures, including freedom and the ability to own property. Today, criminals in most countries are also denied the right to be free, the right to vote, and many other rights. Members of other countries have been dehumanized to justify war and immoral acts against them. And also today, women and minorities are routinely dehumanized and denied rights to move and emigrate, to have equal access to jobs, pay, healthcare, and other services, to observe their religions, and even marry and drive automobiles. We also commonly exclude future generations and other species in our definitions of others. This is increasingly and appropriately being questioned. Many of our society's actions today, such as fossil fuel consumption leading to climate change and the sixth extinction, clearly hurt future generations, yet we struggle to do anything about them. As the people of PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, would be quick to say, excluding livestock and domesticated animals for our definition of others continues to be used to rationalize all manner of inhumane treatment of livestock, pets, and research animals. Wild animals, among other things, have had their habitats limited, reduced, or destroyed, and are often unprotected victims of hunters and poachers. However, since we're biological beings that survive and evolved by eating plants and animals, there has to be a limit on how far our moral concern extends. The new food technologies we covered in that video will likely help this problem in the future, but it's difficult to envision us departing wholly from the historical status quo of consuming other life forms. We need to eat to survive, and as the saying goes, to make an omelet, you gotta break some eggs. As author and biological ethicist Peter Singer has written eloquently, as we continue to live longer and have increasing abilities to meet the needs of others, and are making decisions that impact others more than ever before, the trajectory of human society must be to extend the circles of our moral concern. Before we proceed, 2 disclaimers. First, while we'll not be shy about offering our views, our intent is to provoke further thought and discussion rather than to provide answers. We seek to raise awareness of some of the major ethical issues created by the new technologies and medical advances presented in our videos, and to better prepare you to participate in what might be some of the most important dialogues our species will ever have. These discussions should be collective and ongoing, ultimately resulting in appropriate regulations, which we'll treat in future videos as well, and actions. Also, we are not ethicists. Although we're not ethicists, we choose to raise these issues for several reasons. One, as global citizens, we all need to come to terms with these new technologies and ultimately determine their future application. As such, we should all feel empowered to explore these issues. Second, time is of the essence. Since delays in implementing new technologies could easily result in thousands or even millions of preventable deaths, the sooner we build public awareness and consensus, the better. We hope that the practical perspective inherent in dead reckoning might be helpful in building awareness and driving this consensus. And third, we believe you can get pretty far in addressing these issues by applying just a few common core perspectives. We propose that 7 core perspectives inform what has been considered to be ethical in the past and are helpful in framing what we should consider to be ethical in the future. The first core perspective is that evolution exists and doesn't stop. As we showed in our video, Is Evolution Evolving?, we and all species have evolved over billions of years based on random gene mutation and the somewhat haphazard process of natural, sexual, and now increasingly volitional selection. We are but one of the more advanced creatures that's evolved and are not the final endpoint of life on Earth. It's probably inappropriate to characterize this as a perspective. The theory of evolution has been corroborated with such extensive biological and geological evidence, including every archaeological finding of organisms ever made and irrefutable genetic evidence, that it's become accepted scientific fact. See Richard Dawkins' book, The Greatest Show on Earth, for a compelling coverage of this topic. Also, unless we get too uppity as a species, it's important to remember the following. Homo sapiens has only been around for about 300,000 years, 15,000 or so generations. Did the universe really evolve for 13.8 billion years just to create us as we are right now? It's not very likely. Humans were not around for 99.999% of existence of the universe. As Carl Sagan famously noted, if you plot the history of our universe in a calendar year, human beings emerged at 11:54 p.m. on December 31st. As popular astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson says, quote, "If the purpose of the universe was to create us, it sure took a long time to get there." 99.9% of every species that's ever existed is now extinct. Irrefutable geologic evidence suggests that the natural order has always been changing and has been dramatically changed by our species. The current order of life on Earth is ephemeral and is not ordained for all time. Also, the fact that 99.9% of all species are now extinct is not a sign that the Earth is designed to be favorable to life. We're alive not because of it, but in spite of it. Cyanobacteria, one of the first bacteria to use photosynthesis, dominated the Earth for over 10,000 times longer than we've been on Earth. Dinosaurs dominated the Earth for 800 times longer than we've been on Earth, and would be very likely to still be the dominant species if a random asteroid had not struck the planet 65 million years ago. We're one of 5,000 or so different mammals currently alive on the planet. Homo sapiens has only been around for less than 5% of the time that hominins, upright bipedal apes that have diverged from chimpanzees, have been on the planet. There have been at least 16 different types of hominins on our planet over the last 4.2 million years, and for most of that time, more than one species coexisted with others. American mathematical physicist Frank Tipler writes, quote, "It's a logically necessary consequence of eternal progress that our species become extinct." The second core perspective is human rights and equality. This perspective aligns with the United States Declaration of Independence, which, borrowing from ancient Greece and other societies, says, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This perspective is held broadly, but not universally. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, created after World War II, states, quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights." Ironically, just as yin begets yang, this perspective contains the seeds of inequality. For if some groups of people are better able to improve or extend their lives more than others, inequality will inevitably result. It also contains the seeds of nationalism and even racism. Those who have more seek to strengthen their advantage as a natural application of their right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This is especially so in democratic societies where politicians are elected by people to improve their lives, sometimes at the expense of others. To resolve the cognitive dissonance which arises from having more than others, people inevitably find reasons to believe that they deserve it. This leads to me first, or my country, my group first, thinking and actions. Countries' borders implicitly say, this is ours, not yours. So there's no way around it. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness naturally results in inequality and can foster nationalism and even racism. The best we can do is to recognize this truth and work to balance it by working to ensure equal rights for all. This human rights perspective also leads to speciesism, as we'll see in our next core perspective. The third core perspective is humans first, which holds that the rights of humans should come before the rights of other species. While this point is correctly being challenged, one need only look at the billions of livestock that we slaughter each year, the animals we use in medical tests, the thousands of species that humans have driven extinct, to confirm that this perspective is broadly held across humanity. While the rights of other species are increasingly being recognized, the humans first perspective must be understood as a central motivation for the actions of our species. There are many ways to justify this perspective. We'll include a more complete discussion under the Ethics of Genetic Engineering video. But for now, we'll raise 2 points. First, it's completely natural that we put humans first. We and all other species are naturally endowed with an array of capabilities which have evolved specifically to help us survive and propagate. Evolution has left us with bodies that must consume other forms of life to survive. We have a duty to survive and propagate our species, even at the expense of other species. Just as no rational person would blame a lion for feasting on a gazelle, we can hardly be blamed for using our capabilities as nature intended and using other species to our advantage. Because of this, our commerce and our laws continue to grant humans broad rights over other species. Second, and normatively speaking, we are an exceptional species. Homo sapiens is currently unquestionably the dominant species on our planet. Our advanced brain and an unparalleled ability to communicate and coordinate as a species have allowed us to dominate other life forms, breed and use them for our benefit. As a short recap from our first video, Will We Live Longer? In the last 300,000 years, which is just a flash in evolutionary time, Homo sapiens has outcompeted and driven Neanderthals and other hominids extinct. We've expanded around the globe, we've established agriculture and selectively bred crops and animals to feed our growing population. In just the last 100 years, we've increased the size of our populations by more than 6 times and more than doubled our life expectancy. We and our domesticated animals now make up over 90% of the Earth's biomass, excluding animals less than 1 kilogram. And we've driven the extinction of many other species. However, there are increasingly good reasons to question this perspective based on science, ethics, and practical considerations. The largest scientific challenge came from Darwin himself with the discovery of evolution that accurately placed Homo sapiens among other species versus ordained as superior. The humans first perspective is also justified more by our species' historical capabilities and strength than by ethical considerations. If we grant that other life forms have any rights at all, it can't be considered ethical to needlessly drive them to extinction, kill them, or cause them to suffer. Now that we've achieved global scale and dominance, and our scientific and technological capabilities allow us to meet our needs in ways that can increase the survival of and reduce the suffering of other species, many argue that we increasingly have a moral imperative to do so. The fourth core perspective is the living first. This principle says that the living have more rights than future generations. To state the obvious, the living are endowed by their biology with the rights to move, act, and think that future generations simply are not. Future generations aren't here yet, so they can't act or argue on their own behalf. The needs of the living will always be more pressing than the needs of future generations, ultimately because the living have bodies to maintain and could die, while future generations do not and cannot. Evolution works generation by generation, where the actions and decisions of the living impact future generations. As we discussed in the human rights perspective, most countries support the rights of the living to live as they wish, which commonly includes deciding what to buy, what to eat, whom to marry, and whether or not to have children. Increasingly, though, we understand that these decisions will impact future generations. Deciding to have children or not directly impacts the size and the genetic composition of future generations. What you buy determines how much pollution you create, driving climate change, ecosystem collapse, and even extinction of ourselves and other species. Choosing to eat meat determines not only the lives of the animals you consume, but also the environmental and health impacts involved in raising them, and on and on. So fundamentally, what do current generations owe future generations? Over time and across regions, cultures have had different views on this. The US and much of the Western world seems to prioritize the rights of the current generation over future generations. But most of us feel ethically obliged to give our children and future generations at least as good a shot at life as we've had. At the other end of the spectrum, the Iroquois developed the 7-generation principle sometime between 1142 and 1500, which states that decisions made today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. As natural as it might be to weigh the needs of current generations over future generations, you could also argue that we owe future human generations more than other animals owe their progeny, not less. First, from a pure numbers perspective, we hope that many more generations of Homo sapiens and other species will exist in the future than currently exist. If we roughly assume that the number of people in future generations will be 10 to, who knows, 1,000,000 times larger than the current population, we might multiply the weight given to the future generations accordingly. We'll discuss this in the proportion matters perspective below. This would balance and counteract the otherwise natural bias toward the living. The second reason humans might weigh future generations more heavily is that no other species has both the mental ability to envision their impacts on the future and the wherewithal to design the world to the benefit of their offspring. With this power comes great responsibility to use it effectively. However, currently we seem to be offering future generations less than other species. As we discussed in our Is Evolution Evolving video, we and all animals face the tyranny of our genes, driving us to try to reproduce and create future generations. So perhaps the first thing we may owe our children is to attempt to have them in the first place. But, as we've covered in our How Will Population Growth End video, increasing numbers of men and women are choosing not to have children. For the record, we recognize this as a helpful advancement in the evolution of humanity and our society. But this decision does violate the otherwise common imperative to procreate across the animal kingdom. In addition, our collective decisions about what and how much we consume, how much meat we eat, how much climate change and what pollution we create, have created a world that's predicted to be increasingly unlivable for future generations. As a result, many of us in this currently selfish generation are now reconsidering what we owe future generations and considering that it might be much more than we currently reckon. So, while the living are naturally advantaged over future generations, our success as a species should now allow us to broaden the circles of our moral concern and add more thought and emphasis on the rights of future generations. Also, since our actions have never threatened future generations more, many are properly re-evaluating this living first perspective. Perhaps the Iroquois had it right. The fifth core perspective is the imperative of responsibility and action. Humans are unique in our ability to choose actions that impact ourselves and other species. This creates a moral imperative to make decisions in a way that's responsive to the current and future needs of other humans and other life forms. Also, there will be appropriate divergence in the views of how responsive individuals and countries should be to disenfranchised people and species. As we've discussed, those with their needs met can afford to be generous. Those with unmet needs, less so. The best way to narrow this gap is to follow the human equality perspective and meet more and more people's needs so that more are able to be responsive to the needs of others. However, the scale of this awesome responsibility must not be allowed to cause inaction. The dead reckoning perspective makes clear that we must balance the potential harm from new technologies with their potential benefits to all. Precaution concerning actions must always be tempered by clear assessments of the costs of inaction. The sixth core perspective is that technology serves life and doesn't stop evolving. Humans have a moral imperative to use technology to benefit humans and other species. From spears and bows and arrows to today's advanced technologies, we always invented technology to help ourselves survive and thrive. However, the bar for the ethical use of technologies seems to be very low. For example, here are just a few of the technologies that seem to pass moral muster in today's Western societies. We've created and used nuclear technologies that could potentially end life on Earth. Our technology-driven industrial economies have caused the extinction of at least hundreds of species. Our agribusiness technologies involve raising and slaughtering billions of sentient animals each year to feed ourselves. Our gun and defense technologies are involved in the majority of the 2.7% of global deaths from self-harm and interpersonal violence, as we saw in our How Will You Die video. So we must remain vigilant to ensure that technology serves the long-term interests of humans and other life forms. The reason that technology can't be stopped is that you can't stop someone from thinking and acting in their own self-interest. To be human is to constantly be asking, how can I better myself, my family, and my community? If the answers to those questions involve developing new technologies, which they often have, there's very little that can be done to stop them. All it takes is one person in one place around the globe to bring a new technology to the point of application. Once that technology is successfully applied, it drives natural selection by enabling those who use it to compete more effectively for resources and survival. To drive and discover and push the boundaries of what is known and possible is one of the defining characteristics of our species. Author Nessa Carey wrote, quote, "It's in man's nature to experiment and tinker to improve his lot." And author Jamie Metzl wrote, "We'd be a different species if humility, not hubristic aspiration, had been our guiding perspective." Searching for ways to extend and improve our lives is a natural part of being human. Embracing this quest doesn't call our humanity into question, it actually affirms it. The seventh and final core perspective is that proportion matters. Ethical issues that impact more people and more species are more important than those impacting fewer people and fewer species. This is a core tenet of the dead reckoning framework, where we aim to help as many people as possible to live as long as possible as soon as possible. We also use this principle to argue that the risks from new technologies are relatively small and that the issues impacting future generations should require a higher ethical standard and greater precaution. If these perspectives resonate with you, that's great. If one or more doesn't sit well, that's okay too. There is a legitimate plurality of views as to how best to use new technologies and medical advances to better ourselves and our world. Increasingly, this should become one of the key conversations of humanity. Voicing all views is the only way that we'll continue to evolve our thinking and society to the betterment of all. We believe in respecting those with different views and think making strong efforts to communicate the reasons behind and the evidence supporting them is critically important. Alienating those with different views or leaving them behind risks misinformed, violent backlash that's in no one's best interest. So, if for whatever reason you're not comfortable with the perspectives we've discussed, first, please keep watching our videos. We hope that our arguments will help you to better understand and refine your own. Also, these perspectives are secondary to our overall thesis that human life expectancy will extend, and our videos on the implications are all about how this might impact ourselves, our businesses, our societies, and things you can do to prepare. Also, in our upcoming Dead Reckoning video, you'll see how different views that you might have on ethics and other factors such as regulation and resistance might impact the extension of human life expectancy going forward. Second, continue to explore these points of view by reading excellent books on these and other related topics. Third, we invite you to join the necessary conversation about how humanity can ethically use new life-extending technologies. In our next videos, we'll apply these perspectives to the desire to live longer, genetic engineering, and using new technologies in human reproduction, because they have perhaps the largest impacts on future HLE and also perhaps the largest potential to be delayed by ethical objections. In the meantime, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the Human Life Expectancy channel to make sure you don't miss our next videos, and post comments for the topics you'd like to have us cover. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, as we say at Human Life Expectancy Inc., hi hua! Please, do what you can to help yourself and help us all to live longer.